The previous playoffs is under further review.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk in the last, week or so, or according to me, years or so, but about the polarizing NASCAR playoff system, whether it's been the elimination format, the chase for the Sprint Cup, the full season format. Everyone has their opinions. But after Joey Logano won the championship this season, averaging the worst average finish in the history of NASCAR, there are now internal discussions at NASCAR about potentially adjusting that playoff system, and we'll talk more about all that after we read the report first. NASCAR will review its playoff format this offseason, and changes are possible as soon as next year, though, a larger overhaul may need to wait until 2026 if it ends up being pursued, sources say. Then it kind of talks about the history of the format. It talks about Logano's average finish, about how there was a bunch of backlash on social media and whatnot. And then later it goes on to talk about how Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell, they defended the playoff format. They defended the Final Four. They started out the State of the Sport address by saying these four drivers are very deserving. There's no reason that any of them shouldn't win the championship. And then later it goes on to say, now, two people familiar with the matter confirmed to Sports Business Journal that NASCAR planned to review the format this offseason, with one saying any changes for 2025 would be more likely to be small tweaks given that the season is only a few months away. Any change would have an impact on not only teams, but also broadcasters, tracks, and sponsors. A more complete overhaul would thus likely need to wait until 2026 if one is warranted, the person said. The second person cautioned against assuming that a bigger overhaul would be deemed necessary, but confirmed that the playoff format would be reviewed in the coming weeks. Some senior team executives contacted on Tuesday said they'd be open to forming an industry-wide group to examine the topic. One of the people said that topics that should be examined include whether a win should automatically qualify a driver for the playoffs, as is the case now, and possible changes like whether the regular season champion should get locked into one of the latter rounds of the playoffs, whether the final round should have more than 4 drivers, and whether the final round should be contested over multiple races instead of just one. The person noted that the current system brings excitement, but may have swung the pendulum of NASCAR slightly too far toward entertainment and away from the sporting side. So yes, there has been more heat on the NASCAR playoff format than ever. And in the past, it has seemed that the heat, when it happens on this format, specifically the elimination format, there was a little bit of heat on the chase format, the 10-race chase format, whether it was 12 drivers or 10 drivers, the most heat coming with the whole Spingate scandal, Jeff Gordon becoming the 13th driver. But there wasn't a ton of heat. There was some for sure, but nowhere as near as what we have right now with this system. And the heat behind this system prior to this year really had been about who didn't win the championship. Last year, Ryan Blaney won the championship, but many would argue that William Byron was the best driver all year. Won 6 races, was top 3 in the points the majority of the year. 2022, Chase Elliott won the most races, was the regular season champion, led the points the majority of the season, but fell short. You go back to 2020, and this is probably the biggest example in this format. Kevin Harvick won, 10 races that season, won the regular season championship, led the points the majority of the season, but he had 2 bad races in the round of 8, and he didn't even get a shot at competing for the championship at Phoenix. So it's never really been about, yes, people will point out who won the championships in those years, but the majority of the people look at, oh my goodness, Kevin Harvick won how many races and didn't get a chance at the championship? Oh my goodness, these guys led the points for how many races this season and didn't win the championship? But then this year was different. Yes, a lot of people point out that Kyle Larson won 6 races. He was a point away from winning the regular season championship. A lot of people look at Christopher Bell, and they had the best average finish in the playoffs. They had the most speed in the playoffs. If this was the 10-race chase, they would have won the championship. Those are the 2 that people look at as the, quote, should have been champions in other formats. But the majority of the focus has been on Joey Logano winning the championship. Now, under this format, yes, Joey Logano is the champion. He is the rightful champion under this format. They did everything that they were supposed to do. They had a perfect race at Phoenix. They won that race, deservedly so. But the thing that is in question is not Joey Logano winning the championship. It's the format itself. Do we really want a format that rewards winning a race in the regular season and then being able to win a couple of races in the playoffs and getting to that championship race despite, let's just put it nicely, running not as good as you would expect this season? There was a graphic on Twitter from @NotFifthGear, and it's the average finish of NASCAR champions. Yeah. Obviously, yes, there are going to be years, even in the old format, where everyone has essentially not a bad year, but compared to some championship seasons, the average finish is a little bit higher. We see some 11s in there. We see some 12s in there. And then we get into that chase for the Sprint Cup format, and it varies a little bit, but for the most part, it's between 10 and 12th. And then we go to the elimination format, and this is where we see the highest variety, I guess, the highest margin between average finish and the championship winner. We see 2018 or 2017, and then 2021 with Larson. Those are the lowest average finishes, just below a 10th place finish. And then we see all the way up to where we are this year, a 17th place finish, average finish for Joey Logano. We see a couple 14ths in there in 23 and 22, and even back in 2016, it looks like. The point being, why am I talking to you about the average finish of NASCAR champions? Is that motorsports are extremely unique, whether it's Formula One, whether it's NASCAR, IndyCar, supercars, rally, WEC, you name it. Motorsports are unique because there are 20, 30, 40 teams on a racetrack at once, and any one of those 40 teams can impact the result for someone else, whether it's a single race, whether it's a championship. Something that they do or don't do can impact a championship. And that's already a factor, a big enough factor as is, but do we really want it playing into the NASCAR championship? So my question is, or my point being, is that NASCAR introduced this format 10 years ago. This is the 11th season of using this system. And throughout it, there's been controversy of the championship in a sense because of the elimination format. We saw Ryan Newman in the very first year. I think he had like 5 top 5s in that first season. No wins, but he about won the championship over Kevin Harvick, who I think had 6 wins that year. He made the Final Four over Jeff Gordon, who led the points all season, over Brad Keselowski, who won 6 or 7 races that year. We saw Kyle Busch miss a third of the season and win a championship. We saw this year Joey Logano, if it wasn't for Austin Cindric, spinning at spinning at Nashville with a lap and a half to go, Joey Logano probably doesn't make the playoffs. And the changes that are being discussed, here's where I'm gonna put in some more opinions, as if I haven't said enough. The changes that are being proposed or that are being reported on right now, the regular season champion being automatically advanced doesn't do anything, for me at least, because the regular season champion has had no problems getting through the early round ever since we started doing playoff points. 2017, Martin Truex Jr. wins the championship. 2018, I think Kyle Busch or Harvick won the regular season championship, and they made the Final Four. 2019, Kyle Busch won the regular season championship. He won the championship. 2020 was the one example, I think. Kevin Harvick won the regular season championship. He was eliminated in the round of 8. 2021, Kyle Larson wins the regular season, wins the championship. 2022, Chase Elliott wins the regular season championship, makes it to the Final Four. 2023, Martin Truex Jr. wins the regular season championship, gets eliminated in the round of 8, but that's because they were horrible in the playoffs. This year, Tyler Reddick wins the regular season championship and makes the Final Four. So I don't think that really does what you think it does, because the regular season champion has been making deep playoff runs every year. So that's not really the issue here. The issue here is the lower seeds, the guys who have not been running well in the season, making the playoffs. I think getting rid of winning you're in, I personally, in my opinion, think that is a good idea. If I've fully accepted that there's going to be some sort of a playoff system in the future, and I think getting rid of winning you're in, I think that's the best possible option. On the counterpoint, it does kind of screw the smaller teams. You look at 2023, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. wins the Daytona 500. They make the playoffs. That's a huge difference for that team. Michael McDowell winning with Front Row when they were a smaller team back in 2021. That was a big deal for them. Harrison Burton with the Wood Brothers this year. Chris Buescher back in 2016 with Front Row. I mean, you can point to a lot of different examples of small teams, and winning a race is already a big enough deal for them. But to make it into the playoffs on top of that, that's a multi-million-dollar difference for some of these teams. And so from that aspect, yes, that's a big difference. But in my opinion, for the integrity of the sport, we got to do something different. If we're going to keep this playoff system, we're going to keep some sort of playoff system. I think getting rid of winning you're in, I think that's a good idea. Now, this year, that would have impacted, I think, Harrison Burton for sure. They would not have made the playoffs. And then the bubble would have been like Cindric, Suarez, Chase Briscoe, some of those guys that were like 17th to 20th in the points. Joey Logano, the eventual champion, it would not have impacted him. He ended up finishing 15th in the regular season standing. So if it's truly the top 16 in points, then yes, Joey Logano would have made the playoffs. And then the next thing I would bring into question is, well, if we're not going to do winning you're in, should we really be doing win a race in the round in advance, like automatically? Because that in itself creates a lot of chaos. We saw 3 guys below the cutoff line in the round of 8 win, and that's why our championship 4 was what it was. And we didn't see Larson in there, Christopher Bell in there, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin. That's the reason we didn't see them, is because 3 guys below the cutoff line won races. So that would be the next question I would rise up, is that, I guess raise up would be the proper terminology. English is hard. But that would be the next question, is should a win, if it's not going to automatically advance you in the playoffs, should it really advance you to the next round? Now, yes, you still get your playoff points from winning a race if you are to advance. I think playoff points are a great thing. Winning a race should be, if you're going to have a playoff system, that should be rewarded if you're going to make the playoffs. It should be, winning stages should be rewarded. Running up in the top 10 of the standings, maybe the top 5 if we're going to reduce it down, if we're going to make it a true be in the top 16. Maybe it should just be the top 5 in the regular season standings that get bonus points at the end of the season. And then I think getting rid of a one-race championship is a great idea. The fact that we have it right now, it's too fluky, it's too unpredictable, it's too random. Now, thankfully, we do go to normal racetracks, whether it's Phoenix or Homestead, and for the most part, we've been fine. We have avoided all 4 cars get caught up in a wreck and the champion gets crowned in the garage with a destroyed race car that just flipped over. We don't have to sit around and, question how many laps down someone is and, have something stupid happen. But a one-race championship, that's not it. I think a lot of people have mentioned doing a 3-race round, like, every 3 races, teams get eliminated then for the final 3 races. So this year that would have been Phoenix, Martinsville, and Homestead. I think that's a great mix of tracks if you truly want to do it. But I think we're making a step in the right direction if they do make changes. As for next year, my prediction is that they get rid of winning you're in. And they just do the top 16 in points, but they do it like this year. They do the playoff points, they do the eliminations. We have a one-race championship, and they don't make the huge overhaul of changes until 2026, just because Phoenix is advertised as the championship weekend. The broadcast partners, the tracks advertise, oh, we have a NASCAR playoff race. Oh, we get to broadcast a NASCAR playoffs race. And that complicates things in the near future. But if you give them a couple years notice, that allows them to adjust. That allows them to change their thinking of how they're going to promote things or how they're going to broadcast things. And so, yeah, if it was up to me, get rid of the NASCAR playoffs entirely, but it's not. So realistically, I think next year we're still going to have the same playoff system, but I do think they get rid of winning you're in. And then as for 2026, I think we could potentially see a shift. There's been no confirmed championship date for 2026, so maybe that's a perfect opportunity since we don't have it confirmed yet. That's the perfect opportunity to transition. That's the perfect opportunity to change to something else. But NASCAR has been hell-bent on having this format, and it sounds like they're finally willing to listen, to have some sort of change. Good for them. They've defended the system for too long, if you ask me. Once again, if you know, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the system, but I'm not trying to take away. People are going to scream at me about Joey Logano again. I'm not trying to take away Joey Logano's championship. In this format, he earned it. He's the champion. He's a 3-time champion. You can't take it away from him. I'm not going to deny it. I'm questioning the format. I don't like the format. It's nothing about Joey Logano. He won that race. He was perfect in that race. He's the deserving champion for that format. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. It was a long video, yes, but more talk about the NASCAR playoffs. Yay. I'm just glad NASCAR's looking at it. We should never have had this format in the first place, but here we are 10 years later. But thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one, whenever that may be. We're going to have some live streams this weekend. We're going to be live streaming, live reacting, whatever you want to call it. Watch along, whatever terminology you want to use. Supercars, they got a couple races this weekend. And then we got my annual laugh at how bad my preseason predictions were. That'll be sometime Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening.